So Sagittarius rising, sun or moon. Okay, we have a critical transit of Venus. Venus is going through the 7th house, and that is one of the critical transits for Venus. The other one is the 9th. And it's for both men and women. And that is because the 7th house is a big house for sex and romance. So this is also when we can develop more fully, romantically and sexually. So if you're like already in a relationship, your sex life could really ramp up during this time. If you're not, it brings attractive people into your world, people to interact with. My husband has this going through here. He has Venus going through the 7th house, and it does seem to be having a positive effect on our relationship. And Venus happens to be my spouse planet too, so he's particularly attractive to me now. I mean, he's always attractive to me, but it seems like when this is going through here, since Venus has been there, I have been really noticing more things about him that I like. You see, do you want to say anything about that, Venus going through the 7th?
Well, Venus retrograding through the 7th, if you are having challenges with a partnership, this can be very healing, right? Because Venus is all about healing and nourishment. And Venus retrograding through the 7th can bring in an element of maturity into your relationship, a growth level, so where you're expanding your understanding of what it is that your desires that are being fulfilled and your relationship needs. It can take it to a more mature level, which is healthy, which is good.
Yeah. So now, would that be for the partner or for the Sagittarius rising person?
Well, I mean, when transits are happening in the 7th house, I've seen it work both ways. So I've seen the person who has the ascendant with the planet in the 7th be affected by external, because it's an opposition to your 1st house, right? The 7th is the other. So they're being influenced by someone else. But I've also seen those transits impact the partner specifically. Like the partner will have an experience that's completely separate from the real relationship. But the chart is not only going to show you, it's going to show what's happening to the people that are close to you as well. So it can have a dual impact.
Right, too. And if you have a relationship with the public in any way, it will enhance that as well. You'll find it easier to interact with the public. And not just because we're all starved for each other's company right now, since, we've been in quarantine. And it's also, too, I think I should mention for Sagittarius rising, because Venus is going through the 7th house, which is a critical transit for Venus. This book we do by Stan Tatkin. It's Stan Tatkin. He writes a lot about the attachment theory in relationships, and this is for being in a committed relationship in particular. It's absolutely excellent. And Channing and I did a series on attachment theory and relationships, and I'll put some links down below for you to watch those if you want to, because how often does Venus go retrograde in the 7th house?
Not
stay there so long. Not very often. I don't really know. I know that for Mars, it's like, every 15 years.
So it's looking like Sagittarius is also going to get a break financially as well. They've had Saturn going through their 2nd house for quite some time. And Jupiter's there in the 2nd house. And neither of those are critical bhavas, but that will influence the money, right? They'll influence that Saturn there will tighten the belt, so to speak, a little bit. But the moon is going to be full. So we don't have that on this chart, but the moon's going to be full over there in Capricorn in its 2nd house, right? And that's a critical transit. The 2nd house full moon is a critical transit and so Sagittarius, with all of these retrograde planets, this time frame with Sun being in Cancer, the moon will be opposite. So that full moon in Capricorn, you'll get it once a year. but this will be a nice transit for finances.
Yeah, because there's been a lot going on in that house for like a long time now for Sagittarius rising.
Yeah, right.
Yes, that is true. Okay, you want to say anything then about, well, did we mention that Saturn's going to go back into the second? Did you mention that?
We've been talking about Saturn going backwards and back into the sign that it was in for a little while longer, just the last little bit of this long transit of Saturn. So as it's been going through the second house, that could have been influencing the finances for Sagittarius rising. But eventually Saturn's going to move on out, and that should be lightening things up financially a little bit, and the person will have more ability to focus on their skills. The third house, Saturn, skills. Their energy is going to be. They'll be able to focus their energy a little bit more on what they're wanting to put that energy into.
Okay, well, Mars being retrograde in Aries for a really long time. Might want to maybe say a little something about it. It's in the 5th house. It's going to be aspecting the 12th, the 3rd, the 9th, and for 6 months, a really long time. So the 5th house is creativity, it's children, it's related to your career because it is the 8th from it. So there's like rewards that come from the career. And yeah, so if you are working on some projects, some, like creative babies, this would be, you'll probably get a whole lot done during this time period.
Well, it's romance too, right? The 5th house is what we love. And so Mars can really fire things up. It can bring in some more passion into this area. So definitely.
Especially with Venus going through the 7th, is kind of serendipitous there, that combination. So you ready to move on to Capricorn? Okay. Well, first a little commercial break. If you're enjoying this video, please hit like and subscribe so that you can get notification of anything that we do together or I do on my own. So Capricorn rising, sun or moon. Well, this is me. I'm Capricorn rising. Jupiter is still here. So now when Jupiter is going through the 1st house, it's not one of the like majorly critical houses, but here's what's great about it. It allows you to focus on money issues. So especially if you have debt of any kind, which I know a lot of us are dealing with that now because of the quarantine and not being able to work and all that. But anyway, it helps you to figure out how to get out of debt. And interestingly enough, too, as soon as Jupiter went through into my 1st house, I found myself reading books about money and making money, which is something that's not that interesting to me naturally, right? I don't think about that very often. But I found that I was interested reading that stuff. I can buy these books and have them on my shelf for like 5 years and not even touch them. But then when a certain transit comes along, suddenly they're riveting to me. So that's what's happening. That's a good thing. And then Saturn, he went into Aquarius for a little while. Then he's going to go back into Capricorn again on July 2nd and stay there until the rest of the year, pretty much till December 18th. And Saturn in the 1st house is an important transit because it makes you very aware of your mortality, the passage of time, and how you spend your time. And again, I've been much more aware of how I spend my time, and I've been saying no to a lot more things than I ever did before. And it's been good. It's painful though. It's hard to say no to things that are interesting that you would love to do, but you don't realistically have the time or the energy to do them. And I tend to always overextend myself. So it's been very much a relief in a lot of ways. Do you have anything you would like to say about Jupiter or Saturn there?
Oh, well, I just think it's a really prominent time for Capricorns. You know, they've just gotten finished with a series of eclipses. The last eclipse in Capricorn is going to happen this June. And, you know, this Saturn has been in there for quite some time. So not only are you saying no to things and, you know, reevaluating your time, it just makes people very busy. You know, you have a lot of responsibilities and you have to put a lot of energy into those responsibilities. So you say no to things because you have to, and you have to limit where your energy goes. So your free time is very special. And then the expansion element of Jupiter going through there is positive. You want to expand yourself. You know, you want more to be able to spread that out more. What's that manifestation? How does that come? So the ideas around money are very strong. So these are interesting transits, and you can see Mars retrograding in the fourth house there, which isn't a critical Baba either, but
it's an angle.
It's the angle, and the fourth house is the house of property and real estate and home, and Mars is intrinsically connected with those things.
Right.
So
also, in my life, it does seem like it would be impossible to imagine that we would be moving when Mars goes into Aries June 29th, which is not that far away, right? And then retrograde September 8th, goes direct November 14th, and stays there till January 7th, 2021. But that has happened to us in the past. Like the house that we're living in now, it was like through escrow in a month. It was through escrow in a month, and then we moved in. It was like really fast.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting to see. We're waiting to see what happens. We'll either be fixing the house up to sell it, or who knows, we could actually move. Now, it could be other things too. I'm not sure what else it could be, except that Mars is a problem solver, and fourth house is real estate, so it's got to have something to do with that.
Yeah.
See, Mars rules the 11th, so it's going to be sign aspecting the 11th house.
Mm-hmm.
So again, maybe something to do with income or ways to make money.
Mm-hmm. Or gains, just somehow focusing on gains. So it could be the work that you do on your house, or the real estate property investment that's happening here brings gains at some point. You know, this is a long transit of Mars, so have a lot of different influences.
Now, the inner emotional life, Mars going through there, it just means that I'm probably not going to be able to relax very easily for 6 months. And I'm not going to want to. So that'll be fine. I guess I'll just be working on a lot of things, or maybe working on some of my inner emotional stuff. So again, you may find yourself a lot less tolerant of things that perhaps you've been tolerating and shouldn't be tolerating, or things that you really need to tolerate. So Mars is a problem solver, though. So if you become aware of something that is really bothering you, it would be a good time to problem solve, figure out how you can solve that problem.
Right.
Yeah. So now I do want to mention, since Venus has gone retrograde, went retrograde on May 13th, but before that, when Venus went into Gemini on April 4th, and I've been studying medical astrology, and it's been, taking all my spare time is studying medical astrology, which is perfect for Venus transiting through the 6th house of the healing arts and health.
Mm-hmm. That makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot.
Yeah. So I thought, since it's going to be there until August 8th, that would be a really good use of my time, because it came up. It was a possibility. Anything about Mercury, which will go into Cancer on May 29th, which I believe is tomorrow. Mercury goes into Cancer on May 29th, and then goes retrograde on June 18th, direct on June 12th, and stays there until August 6th, almost as long as Venus is going to be there. and Venus is going to be in Gemini, I mean. And this is in the 7th.
Mm-hmm.
The 7th.
Lots of communication for your partner.
Do you think?
Possible. I know when Mercury is going through my first house, I get so many phone calls, I get so many. But it's also going to have connections with what Mercury rules. So when Mercury is going through your 7th house for Capricorn, Mercury is ruling the 6th. So that could be participating in your group, of studying medical astrology. Mercury can have a lot to do with business. And so when it's and just partnership, working with other people, sharing that information, communication and whatnot. So, Mercury going through the 7th can be connecting with other people on a business level.
Okay.
Or
sure. It's not a critical house for Mercury, but it's an angular house for Capricorn rising. So that's why we mentioned it. Ready for Aquarius? Okay, Aquarius rising, sun or moon. I don't see any critical transits here. Though Saturn has been in the 1st house, but it's going to be leaving the 1st house. So maybe while the time that it was in there, you were aware of how you were using your time, how you're wasting your time, and saying no to things that you can't realistically do. But it's going to go back into Capricorn again on July 2nd and then stay there until December 18th. So Saturn going through the 12th. Mm-hmm. It's not a critical transit, but, it's in a sign for quite a long time. So,
well, the 12th house is also an important transit for every planet.
That's true. Also, too, because the 12th house is letting go of things, and Saturn is endings as well. It's one of the things that Saturn is. So there's letting go of something.
Expenses.
Mm-hmm.
Saturn rules the 12th.
Expenses. And it being in its own sign, it's manifesting those, too. Because it wasn't that long ago Saturn was going to my 12th house. And, there were a lot of expenses.
It could be a retirement, ending something that you've had a lot of responsibilities with for a long time. Saturn going through the 12th house can help finish those things up. Jupiter being in there, the 2nd house lord going into the 12th, the 11th house lord going into the 12th.
But they can still be expenses for your happiness, too. They're not necessarily just, burdensome.
Oh, Mars is going into the 3rd for Aquarius. That's the critical bhava for Mars. It's both siblings and teammates, and it's also from the D27. The 3rd house is the critical bhava for the D27. So when Mars goes retrograde through the 3rd house, it has a dual influence: teammates, associates, siblings. All of those things could become more prominent during this time frame. Also, skills, strengths, and applying your courage. Those things are all going to be amplified when Mars goes through that. Mm-hmm. Yeah, whatever it is, it's going to bring in something prominent, because Mars being there for that long and having that long of an influence in the critical bhava, that's kind of how it really stands out from the rest of the houses that it's retrograded in, for the past 20 years or whatnot. Now it's going through this house that has its most strength in, it has its most affinity with, its most with. So its agenda is for that house. And that really will amplify it pretty strongly.
Now, Venus in the 5th, simply because the 5th is one of the houses of romance. Mm-hmm. It's not a critical house for Venus, but it's still the 5th house of romance. So that seems like it would be a good place. Also, it's a house for creative projects.
Yeah.
I have a friend who's a writer, and she's also an artist, and she's been doing a lot more of that. And just like in recent months, and now that Venus and Rahu is there, she's probably going to be doing that a whole lot more. Mm-hmm. At least that's my prediction for her. this is
Yeah.
going to be doing.
And look at that Venus for Aquarius rules the 10th house. It's retrograding through the 5th. And the 5th is the 8th from the 10th. So there is a potential for a little shift with the career. That's one of the possibilities with that.
Yeah, she's a photographer as well, and she takes the most amazing photographs. They look like something you would see in National Geographic. So maybe she'll do something with those, like monetize them somehow and make them. So, and Jupiter's in the 12th. It's going to be there until December 19th. It's going to go direct. It went retrograde on May 14th. Will go direct on September 13th. And Jupiter in the 12th is a good place for spiritual development, making progress spiritually.
And like we had said, the 12th house isn't the critical Baba, but it's a very important transit, just like the first house. Any planets going through the 12th house can bring a final resolution, some sort of gift as it's going through the 12th. Definitely a spiritual experience, enhancement of spirituality, potentially a resolution for any source or some expenses.
Yeah, expenses for your happiness. Okay, last sign. Okay, Pisces rising. This is your rising sign. Sun or moon. Well, Venus is in the 4th.
Yeah,
that's a house that Venus loves to be in. You want to talk about that since you're Pisces rising?
Well, the Venus in the 4th house is mostly about becoming more comfortable on an emotional level, becoming comfortable with the world and, finding some source of, I would call it relief from the regular stresses. I've just been putting a lot of energy into my meditation practice, into my home, into my gardens, my daily routines, and I've just really applied that aspect of Venus towards a general sense of well-being that I've been in touch with lately. It's not super obvious, It's not this like, oh my gosh, this is the best I've ever felt, but I have been noticing a lot of inner contentment.
Oh, and even though Rahu's starting to go through there, it's more like a focus. Wherever Rahu is, this is focusing you.
Yeah, and we'll see. Rahu is going to be in there for the next year and a half. So Venus's retrograde transit may be a gift before the storm hits. We'll see. And maybe that's why I'm gearing up on working on those things with Venus retrograde in there, so Rahu doesn't have an impact. We'll see. But I have been working on my house. I've been trying to finish a house that I've been working on for a very long time. And so that's still in the process. And so maybe Rahu going through there will stimulate that, help that process.
Right. Well, Saturn will be going back into Capricorn and out of the 12th. It'll be going back there on July 2nd and staying there till December 18th. So it's in the 11th. Yeah, and it's been there for a while now. So like I said, there's probably a whole lot of other transit videos you can watch about that, unless you want to say something about it because you're Pisces rising.
Saturn in the 11th?
Yeah, because it's been in the 12th for a while, but it's going back into the 11th.
Well, Saturn going through the 11th has been a restructuring of the groups and such, my social groups, and where I've been putting a lot of energy into certain groups. I've kind of had less time for that and putting more energy into study, research. I've been doing that for a long time, but it could also be because we've been on a national stay-at-home order, and so that's been part of the Saturn going through the 11th house for me. My 12th house cusp happens to be in the 11th house, so it's kept me very internal and very much working on, things behind the scenes.
Right.
So So that's going to be more of that when Saturn goes back into the 12th house for Pisces rising. There'll be more of that sort of finality in the 12th house. But it's been a fine transit. Saturn going through its own sign. Saturn's very strong in its own sign. It's a manifestor. So while it is still Saturn, it's manifested a lot of discipline and a lot of ability to stay focused on my goals.
That's great.
The 11th house.
That's great. Yes. So now with Mars, he's not in a critical house in the second house, but he's going to be there for 6 months. Mm-hmm. So the second house I know for relationship, it's not one of the better places for Mars to be. But it doesn't mean that it has to be a difficult place, though, either, because when you're aware of where a planet is, you're much more likely to be mindful of when it's manifesting in a negative way in your life. So if you find yourself wanting to speak, logically when you need to be talking in an emotional language or a diplomatic language or something like that, then knowing that it's there and is going to be there for what probably will seem like forever. It's any house that a retrograde planet is in is developing that house. Mm-hmm. So the second house it's wealth and resources and friends and whatever you consider to be a resource. It's also the house of the voice. So maybe in teaching, it's associated with teaching, and Mars is logical. So it would be a great time. If there's something that you've been wanting to teach, it'd be a good time to get that going, get it started, right? I've been bugging Channing to teach for a while now.
Well, it also rules ninth, right? So it's the ninth house, second house. So it can be about sharing wisdom and sharing beliefs and teaching for sure. So we'll just have to see how that Mars does its job, how it works when it's going through there. We'll let you know at the end of it.
So do you want to say anything then about Mercury in the fifth in the moon sign? Because the fifth house is creativity. Moon, Mercury combinations can be writing. Do you keep a journal?
I do.
Okay, so maybe it's a good time then for like getting really into it again. Or maybe you always are into it, but maybe taking it deeper, because there's a lot of different ways that people journal.
Yeah, we'll see how this inspires the creative flow of writing, communication, expression.
It's the seventh lord for Pisces rising.
Yeah.
So Mercury planets can bring people back into your life, like old flames, for instance. So you're going to have to let me know if that happens. And the fifth house of romance, right? And fun.
Yeah, it's also the house of children, right? The seventh and the fifth and the fourth and the fifth. And so because of the COVID stay at home, I've been getting to spend a lot of really great time with my daughter.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah, so it's very possible that we're just having fun or communicating together or sharing information. So that's another possible.
Well, I wonder how many Pisces rising people will be getting pregnant during that time. I mean, with all this enforced having to stay at home thing, right? It's one of the more fun things to do in life. So I imagine there's going to be some COVID babies coming out of all this.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure. Mm-hmm. I've already started seeing some announcements from people.
Have you? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So I will put the dates that all the planets go into the signs that they're going to retrograde in and when they leave the signs below. And thank you very much for doing this with me, Channing. It's always a lot more fun to talk about transits with someone. Mm-hmm. And I always enjoy talking to you anyway about astrology.
Well, thanks for inviting me on. I really, we just have such great conversation. It's fun to share.
We do. So until next time then, goodbye.